How are you guys? I'm going to bring some high energy. Maybe you're like finances. I even wore my pink blazer. You don't see a lot of finance people wearing pink blazers. But I just did our virtual one, and I'm so excited to actually be standing in front of people and being able to speak with you. So raise your hand if you are pretty confident you are already financially sustainable. Okay? A couple of you, a few of you. Awesome. Hopefully, I will still leave some things for you to learn, but if not, I would love to learn from you as well. So we'll ask you some questions as we go. Raise your hand if you would like to be a financially sustainable organization. Right, there we go. Okay, the good news is you are in the right place. So we're going to spend a little time this morning talking about giving you some tools and things that you can do to kind of journey on the way from a scarcity mindset to having a sustainable nonprofit. My name is Karen. I'm the founder and CEO of Infinite Giving. As you heard when she introduced me, Infinite Giving is an automated investment platform for nonprofits. And that was born out of the desire that we had to leverage modern financial technology to help nonprofits like you grow your giving. We do that by investing, hedging against inflation, creating endowments for free, and also helping you to receive stock and cryptocurrency gifts. But I've not always been an investment advisor. In fact, I was a founder and executive director myself of a nonprofit for several years. I also serve on 3 nonprofit boards, including one for higher education. That experience, I think, has given me some unique perspectives. And I think one of the things that I know for sure is that the work you all are doing is incredibly important. And the work you all are doing is incredibly difficult. Because as we all know, the need for collective good work never ends. You don't do this work because it's easy. You do this work because it is a calling. You do it because it's a mission. You do it because you have a desire to help others and you want to leave a positive mark on the world. So I want to take a moment and say thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for making our families, our communities, and our world a better place. All of today is an incredible opportunity because we are surrounded by doers. You all are doers. But as you know, in nonprofit work, the more you want to do, the more you have to have. And that's where money becomes kind of this endless part of your story. It's a very important part of the story. Nonprofits, though, can't just talk about raising money and can only be about fundraising. Yes, it's an incredibly important part, right? This is what we do. This is how you do the work. But you also have to manage what you have. So we can't just raise money, we have to manage it. So strong financial best practices are not just meant for our personal finances. They're not just meant for businesses. They are also meant for you. And so I'm going to give you some tools today that will hopefully challenge you to perhaps think a little differently about how you manage the money that you have. If nonprofits were a country, they would be the 5th largest economy in the world. Some of you may be like, where is that money? I want some of that. I know I was when I was doing nonprofit. But here's what's crazy is that we are still in a scarcity mindset, right? And it is the endless fundraising cycle that we all feel that often leads to burnout. And that's what we're here today to try to help you hedge against that. Because I think we can all agree that financial resilience leads to better outcomes for the people you serve. If you cannot exist as an organization, you cannot move the mission forward that you want to. If you launch a new program that you're really excited about and 6 months later, you cannot fund it, have you done more harm than good? Financial resilience leads to better outcomes for the people you serve. Sometimes it means sacrificing short-term work for long-term goals. So, I'm going to give you 4 ways that we can all journey because it's a journey, y'all, where we can go from scarcity mindset to sustainability. The first one is to build reserve funds. Raise your hand if you have healthy reserve funds. Yes, all right. Most of you. This is great. Some of y'all are like, I don't really know what healthy means. Don't worry, we'll talk about that too. Reserve funds, right? They're your savings account. And I don't know if your boards ever give you a hard time about reserves or there's a lot of different thoughts around that. But you all, just like you would for your home and your personal finances, right? You have a budget, you set the budget, and you build savings. Because I don't know, what would you do if a pandemic happened? Or a war? Or that grant doesn't come through, or the donor that you relied on, who was your largest donor every single year, and then all of a sudden, for some reason this year, they changed their mind. It's the worst when that happens. All right? So there are challenges and things that are out of our control all the time. And reserve funds are those emergency funds that you put aside that help you weather those challenges. All right, best practices for nonprofit reserves. I'm here to tell you 6 to 12 months of operational expenses. Pre-COVID, 3 to 6 months was probably a little more standard. I don't hear that anymore. So I actually hear almost everybody trying to work towards 9 to 12 months of operational expenses, but I put in here 6. Everybody's different, right? This is up to you and your goal where you feel financially secure. But that's 12 months of operational expenses. Most of you guys have reserves, so you know this. That means if you've got $1 million budget and you're raising $1 million, you don't have reserves, right? So anything above and beyond your 12-month operating budget becomes your reserves. And your goal should be another 6 to 12 months of those operational expenses. So if something were to happen, it's not, will we cease to exist? It's not, everything's over, I'm disappointing the people I serve. That's why we have reserves. Becomes long-term savings. So, building reserves, key milestone for a sustainable organization. If you don't have them, you need them. That is the first thing that you do. If you don't have 6 to 12 months, I encourage you to try to build those up. Number 2, hedging against inflation. Unless you've been under a rock, you've probably heard about inflation. We are at some record-breaking inflation rates right now, although they have been higher. It's in the news everywhere. We feel it at the gas pump, yet it should feel very personal to a lot of you for nonprofits because it has a really meaningful impact on you. The first one's the most obvious one, actively losing buying power. The funds that you raised a year ago will no longer support the same things that you intended them to. $10 5 years ago, 1 year ago does not buy what $10 buys now. That's a real pain point. That also impacts your team. And those team members and recruiting new talent, they all need raises. Because guess what? Their cost of living has gone up just like ours has and just like your donors has. So we're kind of in this cycle where it's like, okay, well, we need to increase salaries. It's costing more to do this. And both of these things do the third one. Increased pressure on development teams, right? Because the solution is generally, well, then go raise more money. Great. Are you giving them tools and support to do that? Like there's got to be, yes, raise more, but like how, what? Are there different avenues to do that? Or is there a different way to create money from money? And the good news is there are some other tools that we can give you. So inflation right now, a whopping 8.5%. Now, is this forever? Gosh, I surely hope not, right? Like it'll go up, it'll probably go down, right? That's the goal. Who knows what the Fed's target bank rate is for inflation, even in an ideal economy? 2%. So no matter what, if we're in the best case scenario, 2% every single year, that's what the inflation rate is. Yet, your savings account, if you're lucky, 0.06% annual average returns. Money markets, 0.11. CDs, right now they're at like a decade low, 0.25%. I don't like CDs. You can't even get your money when you need it. So not a huge fan. But a lot of nonprofits are like, great, savings account, money market, CDs. I feel safe. When you look at inflation and you take the emotion out of money, which is hard to do, right? We can never take emotion out of money. That is what it is. Y'all are nonprofit people. You know how to story tell all day long. But at the same time, when you look at the data, that means any money that you have in a savings account, a money market, or a CD, you are actively losing value every year. That's a choice that you have control over. So, investing is a way to hedge against inflation. Is there risk in investing? Absolutely. Right? Everybody knows that. But the more you know, the less scary it can become. And there are ways to do it. If anyone's telling you to go buy all Tesla shares, please don't do that. Not a good idea, right? It's about diversification, all of that. We're not going to get into investment theory a lot today, but I want to show you this graph, right? The S&P 500. You can see there are highs and lows, but look at that red line. There are a reason that donors, donor advised funds, foundations, community funds, all invest. And it's because of that red line. So when you're looking at long-term solutions to hedge against inflation, investment can be the greatest tool to do that. Who here has a 401k or a 403b? Did you know you're investing in the market? Right? Seems obvious, but sometimes when it comes to nonprofit money, we're like, oh, that's scary. I'm like, don't you want to retire? How are you retiring? You don't retire in a savings account because of inflation. So you get into the market, again, long term, and this is how you do that. So here's another look. I took really big, pretty numbers just because it's easy, but I like to show this to people. So if you're lucky enough to have a $10 million endowment, which also, whoop, good for you, that's amazing, and it sits there for 10 years. I have actually talked to a nonprofit who has $30 million of reserve funds sitting in a checking account. I know, I about died. They have a fixed income guy on the board, and it's not gonna go. I tried. All that to say, so if you have a savings account, 0.06% in savings, in 10 years, you'll have made an extra $60,000. No one's mad about that, right? You're not gonna lose money in a savings account. Yet, when you look at inflation, 8.5% now, an ideal 2%, you're going to have lost millions of dollars of buying power in 10 years. An example, and y'all, this is illustrative, big numbers, right? 8%, that's an average annual market return, 8%. That's what, like, our balanced grower portfolio, that's the data point on that for our passive portfolio. In 10 years, that $10 million is $21.5 million. You didn't fundraise more money. You didn't ask for more money. You simply moved it from a savings account to an investment over a long term, again, 10 years. Not only did you hedge against inflation, you've now created some meaningful funding for additional mission, bottom line, and your good work. Y'all, that's a lot of money, right? So it's something to think about. And if you remember anything, remember this cute little pig. He's cute, he's nice, he's safe, he's not gonna hurt you, but he also steals your money. That little pink pig stands for your savings account. He hates earning money. He hates it. So remember that banks are not for storing long-term savings, period. Okay? All right, so the first one was what? Do we remember? Build reserves. The second one was A+ for this group. All right, and the third one is to understand and reduce fees. So this is a journey, right? So once you have your reserve funds and you are investing, so for those of you who already are investing or you're thinking about investing, you've got to understand these third-party fees. And you've got to reduce them because you're spending money in places that, again, could go to your mission and your bottom line. Too many nonprofits do not understand their banking and investment fees. I've spoken to hundreds of nonprofit leaders. I would tell you that 95% of them have no idea what they're paying. When we do RFPs, I'm like, great, all you need to know, what's your current investment strategy? Are you happy? What are you paying? I'll help you. And I'll say, is this a good fit? Here's where we're different or we're not. They don't know. Sometimes it takes them months to find out. It's extraordinary. So I'm going to go really high level, but just so everyone who leaves here knows, investment advisors charge a percentage of assets under management. That's called AUM. So you're going to hear like a 1%, a 2%, and sometimes they call it basis points too. If it's, 1%, it's 100 basis points. Okay, so it's AUM. And the reason I think sometimes people don't understand what their fee structure is you're just like, oh, there's a bank, they know how to do it. Or there's somebody's brother's uncle who's an investment advisor. Later we'll talk about conflict of interest and board stuff, but that's a whole different thing. But all that to say is it is not a check or an invoice that you get. It's taken from the returns. And so you don't always feel it the way I wish nonprofits would feel it sometimes. So the average investment advisory fee, according to a Common Fund Institute survey, for endowment and foundation portfolios under $25 million is 1.34%. Is that good or bad? It's high. Okay. What do you think is a reasonable rate? What did you say? 25 basis points. Okay. So I have talked to people who pay upwards of 2 or even 3% because they get you on these like levels. They're like, oh, well, we'll do this, but by the way, there's this rate, and then we'll add a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Before you know it, it's gone up significantly. So here's an example of, again, breaking it down. Take that big, nice number, and you think, oh, fees, they're good. We trust them. You probably can, but they're going to have a lot of overhead. 1.34% in AUM, that's assets under management. So we're managing that $10 million, $134,000 a year in investment fees. Now you got to remember, they're making returns. So maybe they're making an average 5% annual average return. So that $134,000, that 1.34%, maybe not that painful, right? Because they're getting returns. Yet, I did an example. So for us at Infinite Giving, this would be a 0.50, so 50 basis points for us. Can't go as low as 25, but 25 is good, right? So we do 50 basis points. We're $50,000 a year, right? Still a lot of money. But look at that difference, y'all. $84,000 a year difference that you could save in third-party fees simply by choosing a different investment advisor. Now, we can get into this deeper if we have questions about, should your board manage it? The answer is no. Conflict of interest. What do you do if you have 2 investment advisors on there? I've talked to a board chair who managed their endowment, and he charged them 1.5%. And I was like, sir, you are the board chair. You have a conflict of interest. Yes, you can disclose it, but also you should be doing this for free. So anyway, we can talk about that. We'll table that, but I just digressed for a second. So high fees are because of overhead, right? They're not bad people, but you've got big banks, right? You've got a lot of overhead. And usually what a lot of these folks are doing are active management. Active management means they're looking at it and being like, all right, we're going to sell this and move that and all of that. Academic research. Decades of academic research has shown that over 90% of active wealth advisors cannot outperform index funds over a 5-year period. There was a little Houghton college, no relation. I wish it was because it'd be a really cool story. But at Wall Street Journal, it was all over. Houghton College outperformed Harvard's endowment. They put all their money in ETFs and index funds. So don't pay high fees for active management. To me, and there's different theories to this, but in our mind, when we look at all the data, you should be doing a passive approach of ETFs and index funds. And because of that, you should drastically reduce your fees. Okay? All right. So we've built our reserves. We've hedged against inflation by investing. Okay? And the third one was what? Do you remember? Understanding and reducing fees. The fourth one, yes. The fourth one is even more fun. It's growing your asset giving. So this is where we're going to talk about endowments, cryptocurrency, and stocks. And I want to talk about these things because particularly for small to mid-sized nonprofits, this is an undertapped and underutilized way to grow your giving. And you should know that you can grow your giving by creating more opportunities and easier ways to give. No longer should you only be asking for cash gifts, right? All right, endowments. Oh, raise your hand if you have an endowment. All right, a few of you. Welcome to the endowment world. There are a lot of people who will make you think it is inaccessible and that it is complicated and that it will cost you a lot of money. I disagree, okay? An endowment is simply money set aside, invested. All endowments are in the market, right? Usually at a growth, like a 70-30 or 60-40. Money set aside or invested to create a reliable stream of annual income for a charitable purpose, right? So you got to, again, are endowments for everybody? No. If you're in this scarcity mindset and you're going month to month, endowments are not for you. But if you're starting to, but I still want you to listen because you'll get there one day. But if you're starting to get to a place where you're like, all right, we've got reserve funds, we're moving from short-term goals to long-term goals. All of a sudden you can think 10 years out, 20 years out. Endowments are an incredible tool to give you sustainability and financial resilience because it is a one-time gift that gives infinitely. Every year you're pulling this disbursement off, okay? Here's what I want you to know. High wealth donors want to give to endowments. Agree or disagree? Agree? Okay. The reason I think that is because of higher education. Higher education has mastered endowments. Anybody want to guess what Harvard's endowment is? $53 billion. Stanford's is $33 billion. I'm on the board for Berry College, a small liberal arts school here in Georgia, $1 billion. And while we are super happy for these higher educations, I'm pretty sure we could all agree in this room that Harvard and Stanford, they good. They don't need any more money, right? Yet, they're able to do this, and they do this because I think high wealth donors want to give to endowments. It is the easiest story to tell. It is a gift that you give one time, and it lives forever. That organization that you are passionate about, you give one time, and it is going to give them money every year for decades to come. You can have an endowment named after your family. You can have an endowment that is passed to your children and your grandchildren, and you have a legacy of doing good work. It is the easiest story to tell. Here's the conversations around endowments that I have and that I believe that they are moving towards, right? So you may think, yes, endowments, higher ed, right? They've mastered it. They're billions and millions of dollars. They're all restricted. All right, that's probably not a fit for most of y'all in here. So micro, quasi, and unrestricted endowments. A micro endowment means you don't have to have $1 billion endowment, right? Why? Why does it have to be that big? Endowments don't have to sustain your entire organization. What if an endowment were to pay for a scholarship every year or a salary or a program? At Infinite Giving, we say a micro endowment is a minimum gift of $25,000. If you are able to build up a $10 million endowment, which in the world of endowments, 10 million is small, but if you have some high wealth donors who've been giving to you every year for multiple years in a row, you may be able to tap into that for an endowment, right? $10 million, pull a 5% disbursement, you're getting $500,000 every single year for decades to come that you don't have to fundraise, right? It's meaningful for the donor, it's meaningful for you. Quasi-endowment. Who's heard of a quasi-endowment? My endowment people right there, yes. Okay, I love a quasi-endowments. I'm seeing them more and more. So there's two ways you can do endowments. One, a donor gifts you an endowment. If the donor gifts you that endowment, you can't touch that money, right? That is protected. So if they give you $1 million, you're not going to touch that $1 million. You get the disbursement. Still not bad, right? A quasi-endowment means you as an organization have decided to set up your own endowment. That's it. Your board votes on it. You're like, hey, we built up our reserves. We have some extra reserves. We're going to put this money aside and we're going to seed an endowment. And that way we can ask donors to give to it and we can grow and it will speak to sustainability. And guess what? The reason it's called a quasi-endowment is if you change your mind in 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and your organization has different needs, you can change your mind. The board can vote and you can access all of that money once again. Got it? So quasi-endowments. That's where they're at right now. Unrestricted is another cool thing. This is Infinite Giving only deals with unrestricted endowments because restricted, if you have a donor who wants to give you a restricted endowment, educate them, okay? Because you don't know what you're going to need in 10 years or 20 years. And I speak too often to people who are like, well, we're locked into doing this particular thing, even though the community doesn't need it because we got an endowment. And it becomes a pain point. So unrestricted means, yes, it's still protected. They gave you that $1 million. You can't tap into that $1 million. But unrestricted means that disbursement, that 5% disbursement can go to wherever it's needed the most. It can go to your bottom line. It can go to expenses. It is a great way, again, that speaks to sustainability. And then, of course, with the donor, they can make requests, right? If they're passionate about, well, I really am passionate about this, cultivate that relationship, tell that story, apply that. But if it changes, you legally have the opportunity to use it for whatever you need to use it for. So micro, quasi, unrestricted endowments. And the last little endowment is just remember that they build sustainability and legacy in fundraising. You all are storytellers. You can tell this story. And guess what endowments also really help you with? Planned giving. Tell me those conversations aren't awkward. I've had them when I was an executive director, right? It's like, hey, so when you die. So all that to say is when they already have an endowment and they have this already opportunity, seeing like, great, you have a legacy of giving with our organization. You're clearly passionate about us. We'd love for you to go ahead and set it up. It's a minimum of a $25,000 gift or whatever you want it to be, right? And just say, and then that way in planned giving, let's go ahead and make sure that we're adding that in there, okay? All right, stock donations. Who here accepts stocks? Okay. It is the most tax efficient way for donors to give. Y'all probably understand this, but just so you've heard it. When we talked about building reserves, right, and where hedging against inflation, where do most high wealth donors have their wealth? Right? In the stock market, because they know, just like donors know, donor advised funds, foundations, all of that, they don't leave it in a savings account. Most high wealth donors own the majority of their wealth and assets are in stock market. So when you only ask for a cash gift, they got to go sell it, liquidate it. They're going to pay long-term capital gains taxes. It's a really manual process. And then they're going to write you a check for whatever's left. And they're going to get a smaller credit for the tax for the gift, right? Because it's less. So if you're able to receive stock gifts directly, it saves them on paying long-term capital gains. It means your check is more, right? Because they're not giving you what's left. And then they also get a higher tax write-off for that donation. So it's clearly a win for them. It's also clearly a win for you. Via a study by Russell James, asking for stock gifts in addition to cash can increase contributions by 55%. It's pretty impressive. That's a lot of money. And a big reason is that stock gifts are usually significantly larger than cash gifts. Now, it's also a very manual process, so I would just encourage you that there are ways to make it easier for your donors to give you stocks. It's not the magic wand where money's just going to roll in, right? But you can educate them and you can make it easy for them. I know, like for us at Infinite Giving, we give you a URL, and it's like a little four form fill out. You get notified, and then when you get gifted, we actually liquidate it immediately and reinvest it in your preferred allocation. So there are other tools in addition to us out there who will help you do that easy. Don't just list D2C on your website. Or don't say call. Right? Not a lot. Some people want to, and I've talked to advancement and development people who are like, no, I need them to call me because that's how I build a relationship. I'm like, absolutely. And I get that. But you have some donors who don't want to do that. So be thinking about, all right, we accept stocks, we see the data. How can we do that differently or better to make it easier to educate donors that the opportunity exists and to make it less of a pain point? We all get those things on our to-do list where we're like, oh, I know I need to do that, but like it's kind of a pain. They're not going to do it, so make it easy for them. And finally, the last one, cryptocurrency. Do we have any Bitcoin people in here? Couple? Hey, she gave like a little half, like, claim it, girl. All right. All right, so love it or hate it. Cryptocurrency is here to stay. Okay, it is. The SEC is bringing guidelines down on it. Like there's a lot of things happening. Crypto, hedge funds are in it. Cryptocurrency is here to stay. There is an incredible amount of wealth that has been created in the cryptocurrency space. Incredible. And they are young, on average. They are very technologically savvy. And according to a Fidelity Charitable Survey, they are very philanthropic. Crypto investors are more likely to make charitable contributions than the general population. So you have a whole group of people who've made an incredible amount of money. They're very philanthropic and they're tech savvy. Yet 90% of nonprofits in the US have no way to receive cryptocurrency. Is it an outlier? Absolutely, right? It's certainly an outlier. It's not mainstream. But if you ask me if it's what's going to be mainstream in another 5 to 10 years, this is going to be it. And you need to have a way to receive cryptocurrency if somebody asks you if they can gift it to you. Because again, the IRS treats it just like stocks. If you're like, great, liquidate it and then send it to me, they're going to pay long-term capital gains. And if anybody knows anything about crypto people, they don't like to pay taxes. So something to think about, cryptocurrency. All right. So that is our journey to financial sustainability from a scarcity mindset. And it is a journey, right? So we have building your reserve funds. Once you build those reserves, and we talked about 6 to 12 months, I'm hearing more and more about 9 to 12 months, then you have to hedge against inflation. Once you're in the market, you need to understand and reduce those investment fees as much as possible. And the last one is to grow your asset giving. Consider endowments, stock gifts, and cryptocurrency. I'm going to leave you with this final aspirational thought. Our team ran all the data, all the 990s and all of that from nonprofits here in the US. Nonprofits could create an additional $5 billion each year in the US simply by changing their financial practices. That's not money you're fundraising every year. You're not working for that. That's making a choice about not just fundraising money, but managing it. And we got this stat by looking at all of the money sitting in nonprofit savings accounts and investing that and getting your average annual 8% market returns, and in reducing fees from that 1.34% down to 0.5%. Think about all the good that money could do. So again, my name is Karen. I'm the CEO of Infinite Giving. We would love to help you do all of these things, but I'm also just thankful to be here with you today. And I think we have about 10 minutes for questions, 5 minutes for questions. I went a little long. So if you have any questions.
You said something about making stocks easy to receive. You mentioned a specific resource and I missed what you said.
Oh, that's us. It was a little bit of a shameless plug, but all that to say is a lot of people, what we see is that they will just be like, hey, if you want to gift a stock, email so-and-so or call this number. Or if you want to gift a stock, here's the D2C information, the wiring information. And at Infinite Giving, we're a registered investment advisor, but we use technology. And so we were like, man, technology can solve this. It's such a pain point. If you receive stocks and you ever have like a tranche of like 10K and you're like, who's that from? We saw 10K hit it. Great news, but like we don't even know who to thank. There's several pain points in that we were able to leverage technology. So on our platform, we give you a URL that allows you to have a form that's meant for you, and it goes directly into your brokerage account. And then we take away the manual, like, what do you do with it? Do you liquidate it or not? And we just handle all of that for you. And we also give you transparency into who that is. So that was a softball that I just hit. Thanks. But yeah, but there are other there's other organizations out there that do it. We just, if we have your brokerage account, we do it for free. We do all the endowments for free and all of that. Yeah.
So the smaller nonprofit, or say a new nonprofit, I am one, and this is interesting. Thank you. Sorry. Just smaller nonprofit, new nonprofit. I've been self-funding my nonprofit for 7 years. Just give you an example. So if for a nonprofit such as myself, not a lot of planned giving, not a lot of money at all, we don't even have a revenue stream. So in the endowment, can you speak to what is that process like for an organization like mine that may be interested in what you're talking about? Like, what should we do as a next step? Because I would like to see the funds that I've invested go into an endowment, and that would make more sense versus on paper seeing the amount of money that has been invested and there's no, we don't know where the money has gone. So I want to know more about that.
Yeah. First off, great work funding, right? That's hard. We've been there. We've all been there. Okay. I would say for a self-funded, no revenue stream, scarcity mindset, I would hold off on the endowment. So as beautiful as it sounds, that doesn't mean you can't work towards it. But I would say build up, because endowments live forever, right? Unless it's a quasi-endowment, then you can pull it out whenever you want. So you could do a quasi-endowment. You could say, hey, I just want to fund it, and I want to put my money here and do that. You can absolutely do that. But generally speaking, donors are going to want to know that you're sustainable before they gift you an endowment. And so they're going to be like, well, if you don't know if you're going to be around in 5 years, I'm not going to gift an endowment. And so that's where it's kind of, we do work through this process of that. For your personal finances, maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to put it, maybe you open a brokerage account and that's your money and you're going to do that so you can get it invested as like a donor for your own. And then, so there's some creative ways around it if that's what you wanted to do from you personally. Yes. We'll go back. Karen at infinitegiving.com. It's the most unfortunate name in all of 2020. You spell it that way too, Karen. But I swear I'm not one of those. Even if I kind of look like one, I'm not. I promise. But yeah, Karen at infinitegiving.com. I know, right? But a blonde, I'm white. God, it's the worst. Okay, yes.
So I'm the first development fundraising person for nonprofit. We've been around about a decade.
Okay,
We just brought in $1 million in revenue last year.
nice.
We have 6 months operating. We just started creating a development team. I have a part-time admin. We're working with a coach to build out donor relations. I feel like we're ready to start looking at endowment, stocks, crypto. Because we're between like 1 and 2, I think, on your list. Does that sound right to you?
It does. And also, you're coming to a job with a lot of pressure, but man, you're in a good spot. That's great. Like, you're in there. So I would say yes. Like, when I talk to nonprofits or like that, like for us to open a brokerage account with Infinite Giving, it's a minimum of $25,000. And so our whole premise is we work with small to mid-sized nonprofits. We're like, if you got over 100 million, like, you're good. There's so much politics in that. But like, these other folks are underserved where they're paying high fees. There's high minimums. Like, there's not been a lot of options. And so we talk to a lot of smaller, and they're like, hey, I have $250,000 to invest. We all started people have $40 million endowment. So like, there's everybody in between, but it's a minimum of 25 for us. So I would just say it's up to you guys and kind of where you're at. But I would say, I would agree with you that you're at a place absolutely where you should be doing that, especially like stock gifts. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Similar to that, we have about $500,000 budget and we're a nonprofit. We have about 14 months reserves. We do open for the first time a nonprofit fund with a community foundation that they also give us grants throughout the year, so we have a good relationship with them.
Do you know what your fees are?
Yes.
Okay.
1%.
Okay.
1%. In regards to the endowment, what will be the next step for us? Our organization, you mentioned the minimum gift of 25K.
Mm-hmm.
But what else? What are some more steps that we
So I'm not, I want to help, but I also don't want to be too self-promotional. But yeah, so we have an endowment gifting tool that when you have a brokerage account with us, we have to manage at least $25,000 of your money. And we can probably do it for more affordably than community foundations, because community foundations are wonderful, do great work. Who's their primary customer? The donor. Community foundations are made for donor-advised funds, not nonprofit entities. So I hear that a lot. Not bad. They sometimes manage nonprofit funds, but often their overhead is significant because they do this beautiful like pairing, right? And the goal is that they're sending money to you, but they should not have to manage your money to send money to you. It's just a little thing. So we have an endowment gifting tool that allows you to use donors. It's free if you're with us, and it allows them to gift an endowment to you, and we handle the legal and agreements for you. If you do a quasi-endowment, we also do that. If y'all have never invested before and you want an investment policy statement, do not pay people to create it. Go to infiniteGiving.com under resources. We have a free template IPS that's gone through compliance, that's gone through attorneys. We highlight it yellow where you can plug in your own information. Don't recreate the wheel. But yes, I know, do you? And then we'll go there, and then I think we're almost at time, right? Yeah. All right.
Can you just share with us what the brokerage return on investment has been over the past year?
So we have 10 different portfolios, and they range anywhere between a 20-80 and an 80-20. And we also have ESG portfolios, which are a little more risky, but sometimes get higher returns, but there's not a lot of data, so I don't recommend them a lot. But it varies between 3.5% and 10%. All right, this corner.
I'm just curious about how to move a board away from a scarcity mindset, because we should not have it, but I cannot move my board away from that.
Boards are tough, y'all. I talk to boards all the time, and I'm like, come on, you can do it. Even like boards I'm on. Luckily, those are a little easier, but data. I mean, if they're digging in data and the numbers, that's kind of why I even did it in here, is like data is hard to argue with. So it's an emotional thing. And money is emotional no matter what, and finances are emotional, and then there's a layered responsibility of it's donor money, and we want to make sure, but when you're looking at inflation, when you're looking at the academic research that talks about passive investing, a lot of that data and storytelling can be really helpful. And also, everyone should have board terms. So if you get really stuck, board terms are really, really important, because sometimes there's like I'm talking to somebody right now, and they're like, we all need to do this. They're in a savings account, and they're like, there's one person. And I was like, that one person should not have that much power. Like, that is an unhealthy board, which is a much bigger conversation for another time. But I would just say, go data. When in doubt, go data. Yeah, I would say if you can create a revenue stream, right? Every nonprofit loves a revenue stream if you can do that. So create something where you have some kind of steady income coming in. In addition to that, I think just growing your donor base. So before you should invest, you need to have reserves and getting out of a scarcity mindset. And if you're funding yourself, that's hard to do, especially even for you personally, because all your personal savings is probably going into your nonprofit. So I would say you need to figure out that personal side of that, and then you just have to grow your donor base, apply for grants, and then work your way towards that.